Thursday, April 5th, and this is Geeknights. Tonight, we present the prestigious Worst in Podcasting Awards.
Let's do this.
I gotta say, the forums have been rocking.
Have they now?
There's been more people there lately than I ever would have really expected to be at a forum that I guess I made.
I don't know. I think part of my problem is if I wait all day and don't read the forum, and then I go late in the day, there's a billion posts and I don't know what to do. But if I read it constantly, it's not posting so fast that I can't keep up.
It seems like most people will wait X amount of time and then suddenly pop in and respond to like every single thread on the front page and then come back a week later and see what people had to say in return.
Yeah, and some people just reload it constantly. And when I'm at work and I have no work to do, you'll see me reloading it constantly. When I have a lot of work to do, you'll see me load it like twice a day.
Yep. Suffice to say, a lot of new people have been joining the forum, so I begin with this mostly to say to all of you who have applied and not gotten an email back, you actually did get an email back. We have never, ever, well, with the exception of one person who reapplied like 8 times after we banned him, ever denied someone an application. So if you applied to our forums and didn't get a response, you probably use Yahoo email, and they probably...
Or
Hotmail, and they probably blocked it thinking it was spam.
I think Hotmail is the one that's blocked, but I don't know about Yahoo Mail.
Hotmail is blocked at pretty much 100%.
Yeah, if you got Hotmail,
Get Gmail?
get Gmail. It's free and better. Why would you bother using Hotmail? I don't get it.
Yes, and also, a few people pointed out that Mr. Period hasn't been around lately. He has informed us that he has a life, and he hasn't had time lately. He swears that, like General Douglas MacArthur, he shall return. And until then, we're probably going to at least look into getting 1 or 2 more moderators, because even if he comes back full-time, there's too many of you for him to police anymore all on his own.
Also, you people haven't been so bad lately.
Yeah, I mean, it's all been little things that, while they irritate me a little bit, but that's just because I'm a nut, and they'd probably piss the hell out of him if he were actually reading the forums lately. They're not that big a deal. No one is doing the egregious, horrible things that you used to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, the worst things I've seen lately are people saying then instead of than, and some theirs that are incorrect.
While that is terribly bothersome, at least no one is posting 70-sentence-long paragraphs without capitalization.
Yeah, that pretty much stopped. I don't know if the people who did that sort of thing learned, or if they just got pissed off and gave up.
Well, it helps that I would say most of the people in our forums are reasonably intelligent.
Yeah. So, we are in the midst of the Jewish holiday of Passover, or Pesach, if you are a Jew, and that is what you call it. And I am a Jew, but not religiously.
Didn't you used to call yourself an open-source Jugal?
No, that was something that you made up. But
Nah, because you went way on about open-source Judaism for a while.
I talked about it because it was a cool thing. I didn't say that I was it.
Aha.
Anyway, Passover is the holiday where the Jews celebrate being freed from Egypt. Have you ever watched that, Charlton Heston movie, 10 Commandments?
Let my people go.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty cool story, pretty cool movie. And the thing is, a lot of people, Jew and non-Jew, believe that it was true, that at some point in history, Jews were slaves in Egypt, and Moses freed them, and some people, might not believe it that he parted the Red Sea, but, who knows about that. The thing is, parting the Red Sea is obviously didn't happen. I mean, come on, that's just silly. But maybe a lot of reasonable people do believe that Jews are slaves in Egypt. That's not unreasonable.
Well, a lot of people also believe that slaves built the pyramids.
That's true. Well, we don't know about that. But the thing is, there's only one piece of evidence ever to suggest that, yes, indeed, there were Hebrews, because they weren't Jews yet, they were Hebrews, or Israelites, who were slaves in Egypt. One piece of evidence ever. Pretty much anyone who knows anything about Egypt, every Egyptologist, every archaeologist will tell you, any reasonable archaeologist will tell you that Jews were never slaves in Egypt, and that's all made up. And it's just a story, and it's not real.
Yeah, how would they have gotten down there anywhere? Did they start there?
If you question this and you think that Jews were slaves in Egypt, this is how you can figure out that you're wrong. First, answer this question. What year were Jews slaves in Egypt? Okay, now go look in history and see what was happening in that year. No matter what year you pick, Jews won't be slaves in Egypt in that year. Obviously, that's sort of simple and silly, but really, think about it. What year? You pick a year like, how many BC are you going to go? And then figure out what was happening, according to archaeology and the best historical records we have in that year. And you will find that we have evidence for things that were happening that will directly contradict Jews being slaves in Egypt. Like, I don't know, Jews not being there, Jews being elsewhere, other people interacting with Jews and Hebrews in other places at the time, etc., etc. So, yeah.
So, taking a page from the previous year's New York Comic-Con, Six Flags Over Georgia decided to go forward with an ill-conceived idea. They thought, you know what would be a great promotion? Let's say that anyone who shows up today between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. gets in free. And let's advertise this all over the place, and it'll generate a bunch of buzz. We'll market it as some sort of ditch work and come to Six Flags Day.
That's a pretty good idea because, number one, what was today? Thursday? Yeah, people aren't going to amusement parks on Thursday. However, it is spring break, so you are going to get some people. Now, amusement parks are pretty expensive to get into, but they make their real money in the park with their carny games and their overpriced
I remember
food.
at Cedar Point, even back when Cedar Point was double awesome as a kid, and it cost like $50 to get in for one day, and another $30 or $40 to go to the water park on top of that. But you got in there, all right. You want a soda or a water from one of those vending machines? It's like $3. You want a hamburger and fries? $9. Yeah.
You got to bring your own food in, but they don't let you.
No, they don't stop you. What are you going to do with that food while you're riding roller coasters?
You can put it in a locker.
Yeah, the lockers that cost a lot of money and are basically Dutch ovens. Yeah, bring a hamburger in, stick it in one of those lockers, and see how you feel about eating it an hour later.
Oh, God.
So, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., free entrance. All right, what do you think happened?
How do you think people came?
Well, apparently, well before 6 o'clock, the highways in every direction from this park were completely stopped by people trying to get to this place. Then, because traffic was stopped, people just abandoned their cars on the freeway and started walking. So this unruly mob gathers and eventually makes it to the Six Flags to find a previous unruly mob that had gotten there before the highways stopped, already filling the parking lot. A bunch of fistfights broke out, and it was general chaos. Furthermore, the people at Six Flags were telling people not to line up because they didn't want to be responsible for it. And they were telling anyone who didn't show up with a car that they don't accept anyone who isn't in a vehicle. And they tried to turn them back.
How could you not accept anyone who's not in a vehicle?
A lot of places do that to keep the riffraff out. In fact, most drive-thrus, if you try to walk through a drive-thru, they'll call the police.
Really?
Yeah. I tried to do it twice as a kid, once on a bike and once on foot.
Wow. Why would they call the police?
Both
There's no
times
law.
they said, go away or we're calling the police.
There's no law. What did they get? All right. Call the police. What are you going to do?
Well, here's what they do. They say, don't come through the drive-thru. If you don't leave, I'll call the police. And if you don't leave, you're now trespassing, and then you've broken the law.
Anyway.
Yeah. So, obviously, they didn't learn the fundamental rule that has been known in ages past, mostly in nightclubs, where the cover charge does not exist to make you money.
Well, it does make you money, but that's not its purpose.
You don't have it to make money, unless you're the anime club and we're trying to make $1.
Yeah.
The cover charge exists to keep the riffraff out. And by riffraff, definitely not to sound, I don't know, classist or anything like that. But the cheaper something is, the more people will show up and the wider cross-section of society you will get.
Yeah,
And
I mean, imagine if you opened up something for free. Homeless people will show up. And not to make fun of homeless people, because not all homeless people are bad, but many homeless people are insane. But they're not insane enough that they won't show up to your free thing.
Well, more importantly, it depends on what you're giving away. If you're giving away t-shirts and you get 1 million of them, you're not going to be, it doesn't matter who shows up.
Yeah, it does.
Well,
that's
one,
right.
it doesn't matter who shows up because you give them a t-shirt and it's no skin off your back.
Yeah.
And two, if you run out of t-shirts, you break down your little cardboard box and you walk away.
Yep.
If you've got a limited resource and you offer it for free, and there are more people within, 400 miles of you, especially if it's something that has any perceived value, who want that thing, they're all going to show up. People will come out of the woodwork you didn't even know existed.
You know, amusement parks haven't been doing well in recent years.
Actually, no, they haven't. Cedar Point, even, which is like the king of roller coaster parks. They make a crazy, stupid amount of money. Yet, everyone who on the internet has talked about going there has pointed out the incessant, horrible, Roman-esque decline of the Cedar Point Empire. Every year, the people get crappier. They're at X-ray machines because more and more people are bringing guns in and fights are breaking out and things are breaking down and vandalism's everywhere.
Yeah, pretty much amusement parks just getting crappier and crappier. Yet, all of a sudden, they make one free and now people show up. It's like people have forgotten about amusement parks maybe and they need the opportunity to go to one for free to remember they exist.
I think there's a lot of factors at play. I mean, amusement parks still do well.
I mean, obviously people want to go to them. If people didn't want to go, they wouldn't go even if it was free.
Well, I was trolling around Google News just looking at various things about current amusement parks and trying to look on Wikipedia, and it seems like the problem is that amusement parks get the same number of people, but they have to pay a lot more in maintenance because the people who show up are generally a lot more destructive than people used to be, and there's a lot more damage, vandalism, liability, fights, and police action. I don't know if it's a consequence of society. Maybe they need to raise their prices, because regardless of how classist it may be, the fact remains that the higher price you set on something, the more discriminating you can be in who shows up.
That is true.
The operative thing here is not an argument about class values or the horrible cycle of poverty where people have problems because they're poor, but then they're poor because they have problems, and it's this never-ending cycle, and even if you're smart, it's hard to break out of it, and it sucks. I'm not talking about that. I'm not trying to make any sort of judgment here. The fact remains that whoever runs this Six Flag is a consummate dumbass who doesn't understand how the world works, and here's the kicker. Before 6 a.m., before it even opened, at the last minute, they decided, you know what? We fucked up and canceled the promotion.
Can you do something like that?
Yeah. And you know what? The angry mob was still there.
Yes, it was.
I didn't really read the follow-ups, but I can't imagine that ended well. Though, according to 2 articles, there's a zoo nearby, and that zoo had more people show up than it's ever had.
Go zoo, go.
Probably because people pissed off had already taken the day off work. What else are you going to do? There's the amusement park, the zoo, or, I don't know, the real world, but most people don't think of that.
Or you wasted a day off work. That's really terrible if you do that.
I don't know, if I took a day off work ever, even if I failed at everything I planned to do, I'd still get more done that day than if I'd gone to work. Things of the day. You might remember way back when our internet was out, we did things of the day from our real life because, well, there was no internet. We had no way to in any way, short of calling people or finding pieces of dead trees with this dark stuff splattered all over them to find out what was going on in the world. So we had to observe our surroundings and make, what's the deal with blah, 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 kind of, yeah.
These pretzels are making me thirsty.
Anyway, I got one of those kinds of things of the day today. You see, one of the places I work, I'm setting up all these computers for them, and most of the people there are really cool, and on more of them than you would expect are totally metal. When I say metal, I mean know people who run very popular metal sites, get into metal concerts free, have pictures of themselves hanging out with musicians from Queensryche. And this girl, not only is she totally metal, but she's also totally Scottish. And with Tartan Week and all that, while I'm setting up computers and everything, she offhandedly mentions that, yeah, tonight she's hanging out with I guess this was last night, the previous president of Scotland and Sean Connery. And sure enough, today, I go into work and I'm fiddling with other computers, and she has a picture of herself standing on a chair next to Sean Connery.
Is she short?
No, Sean Connery is just gigantic.
Is he really?
All right, Sean Connery looks really big and impressive on screen, right?
He looks about 6-something.
Yeah, but also, he has this charisma and this presence. You don't usually when you see someone like that in real life, they're a lot smaller than they look on screen. Sean Connery looks twice as big in person.
Is he really?
His head is bigger than other people's heads.
Whoa.
It's really big.
Okay.
And according to her, he is exactly as charismatic and awesome as you would guess from his movie acting as he is in real life.
But isn't he I've heard he's also kind of like an ass. Like, not an ass, like a guy you don't want to talk to, but like a wise ass.
You know what? I really like wise asses.
I like to be a wise ass too.
I know.
I'm just saying.
Scott, you like to be a wise ass, you say. I never would have guessed. What's the deal with Scott being a wise ass?
What's the deal with him not being original?
What's the deal with making fun of... anyway, I thought that was pretty cool, so that's my thing of the day.
All right, my thing of the day. Earlier in the week, Rim did a thing of the day of a Flash Tower Defense game, because, we love them Flash Tower Defense games.
Yeah, very briefly, those of you who aren't in our forums, everyone in the forums is crazily addicted to the stupid game and posting their scores, so join in on that action. But anyway.
There's another Flash game that was all over the internets today called Chick Chick Boom, which is pretty cool name because, Chick Chicky Boom, Chick Chicky Boom, Chick Chicky Boom.
I don't know, when I hear Chick Chick Boom, I think someone cocking a shotgun.
Oh, all right. I think of The Mask with John Kerry. Jim Carrey. John Kerry is the senator.
Yes.
Anyway.
I think part of that is that I spent most of my childhood playing Doom, and you like The Mask, so...
Yes. So,
Not that I don't like The Mask.
Chick Chick Boom has nothing to do with shotguns or Jim Carrey movies. It's a Nintendo Flash game. Nintendo makes it, and it's free to play. And the way the game works is you've basically got what looks like a volleyball court. And on one side are these little balls that are yellow, and they're chicks. On the other side, you have these black balls, which are evil. And you've got all these things you can click on. You can click on, and I've only played level 1, so I don't know what all the things are. But basically, you have a left arrow, a right arrow, a weight, and a bomb, right? And you click on one of these things. And let's say you click on the bomb. All right, a picture of a bomb shows up. You have to trace it with your mouse. It's a lot better if you have a tablet PC, because then you can trace it with your stylus.
I watched Scott trying to do this on his laptop with the touchpad.
With a touchpad on a laptop, it's impossible.
It's pretty much like trying to play that Carney game of pull the ring up the snake without touching the snake.
It's harder than that. Anyway, depending on how accurately you trace the bomb, you get a greater percentage. If you don't do it well enough, you don't get anything. So let's say you trace the bomb with 86% accuracy. All right, a bomb with 86% power flies over into the enemy territory where the black balls are and tries to blow them up. Let's say you do the left arrow. All right, you draw the left arrow with 90% accuracy. So with 90% speed, all your chickens' yellow balls will run to the left side of your court.
You know what? You know who'd be really good at this game? Any of our artist friends with a Wacom tablet.
Probably, yeah. Wacom tablet would own.
Especially since they can draw.
Yep. But basically, you click on different maneuvers you want to do and attacks you want to execute, and then you have to trace the symbol for that attack or maneuver with better accuracy in order to execute the move better. And you try to blow up the other side and not have your side get blowed up.
That's really cool. I kind of like the idea of having simple, direct competition kind of games like that, where the skill isn't just knowing what to do, but being able to do it, which is hard to do in video games without just making like a Twitch FPS.
See, the thing is, the game is sort of real time because you can just keep clicking. You can keep doing stuff. It's like as soon as you execute a move, it like and once the move executes, you can try to do it again. So it's not like a turn-based thing where you do one, I do one, you do one, I do one. But at the same time, well, I guess there is nothing else at the same time. That's the whole game. The only other thing I can say about this game is when you beat levels, you unlock power-ups, but they're not power-ups in the game. They're power-ups in real life. Like in the first level, if you beat the first level, it lets you download a Mario basketball wallpaper. And if you beat level 2, it lets you download some other wallpaper. And you get Nintendo goodies for beating levels in this game.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. You could get these goodies at the Nintendo.com website, but I guess if you want to get them this way, that's cool too.
Well, so, I suppose a lot of you, especially those who have submitted, have been waiting for this for a while, but it is finally upon us. I thus present to you the Worst in Podcasting Awards with Rim and Scott.
All right, just to let everyone know, these aren't the worst podcasts on the internet.
Far from it, in fact.
We asked our listeners to nominate podcasts they thought were the worst. And therefore, most of these podcasts involve video games, anime, and other geeky things like that.
Yes, it wasn't so much a what is the worst podcast or who out there sucks. It was more of a what can you find with some iTunes Dig Podcast searching.
Yes. And our listeners came through, and they submitted many a podcast, and pretty much all of which were bad.
Now, before we continue with the actual awards, we've got a lot to say because I've learned a lot in listening to a bunch of bad podcasts and also in reading the writings people sent us about these bad podcasts. And there's a lot of similarities between many of these and other ones in general that I listened to that weren't actually submitted.
So what did all these bad podcasts have in common?
Well, one common thread among bad podcasts is the repeated, unlicensed use of unlicensed music.
Really? You think that, like, podcasting, like the culture of podcasting, the podcasting community, that's like their number one issue is, you know, what music can you play? Play pod-safe music only, blah, blah, blah. You think that someone being a podcaster would recognize basically the number one thing the community talks about and do something about it. At least acknowledge that you're playing copyrighted music or say something about it.
Now, granted, many of the people I listen to out there don't seem to be a part of the podcast community. I know for a fact that we are not really part of the podcast community.
Not so much, but at least partially. Like, I got a toe dipped in there.
Well, that's because
I keep my ear to the wall, you know?
We happen to have met a few other podcasters, and I noticed that we mostly only listen to their podcasts.
I listen to other podcasts.
Yeah, I listen to maybe 50% of my podcasts are people I know, and the other 50% are just good podcasts.
I think actually I should increase our involvement in the podcast community.
Well, another thing I've noticed is that a lot of really bad podcasts really talk up a lot of podcasting awards that they have won. And
really, there's so many different people who've tried to make podcasting awards, and all of them that I've seen have been pretty much like, who cares?
Well, here's my assessment. This is my RIM's professional opinion here. And by saying professional, I hereby lend all sorts of authority. No, but I've noticed that podcasting awards are almost exactly like web awards were in the early 90s. You see,
all right, does anyone, if you might not remember this, but way back in the day when websites were new, like 1997, 98.
Like when you could go to the bookstore and people would sell for a lot of money yellow pages of the internet that would list a good percentage of the web pages out there.
Yeah. In those days, there were different websites would get awards for having good design or whatever. And basically the way this worked is you would go to a website and you would say, you know, I nominate my website for the award or something like that. And then if they decided that you won the award, they would send you an email and say, congratulations, you won. Here's an image to put on your site. And people would put a bunch of images on their site of all the awards they won. I even did this when I was a punk kid.
I did too. It was right next to that "Don't use Netscape Navigator, it's garbage" icon.
Yep.
And that flaming skull that rotated that said email. And
the lesson that I learned was that the people giving out the awards are much smarter than the people who won the awards, because basically you linked that image to the site that gave out the awards so that people knew you weren't just faking it. As a result, the people who gave out the awards would give the awards to anyone who asked, as long as your site wasn't complete crap. At least, I don't know, maybe they did just give it to anyone who asked.
Furthermore, all of these sites that gave out the awards happen to have a lot of ads on the front page.
Yeah, and basically they just got links to their site all over the internet, and people would come to their site and see ads, and they would get a lot of visitors, and you would feel good about yourself when really all you did was ask someone to give you an image, and they did.
Yep. Now, a lot of the other awards, and podcasting, there's a lot of this now, too, where there'll be some sort of web page with a thing, and you got to send all your listeners to go and vote for it. And then you get people to vote on the internet. Yep. And I don't think I need to explain what's wrong with that.
Yeah, it pretty much just comes down to, you know, which podcast got which listeners to go to which award site.
Now, I will note, for anyone who doubts us, look at the super big professional podcast, all the Twit stuff, things like that. How many podcasting awards have they won that are listed on their websites versus how many awards the 5-listener podcast about, I don't know, Animal Crossing has won?
About the same number. The difference is the Twit people tend to win the more legitimate awards that happen at, like, you know, podcasting conferences or things like that, or awards where nominations are completely open and no one sends their listeners to go vote in it, and it's actually decided by some sort of actual system of some sort.
Yep.
And these other awards are just like the web awards.
Well, being that as it may,
the Webbies are the only real web awards.
I hereby declare Rim Scott of Geeknights to be the runners-up for Best Podcast.
Woo!
Best Podcast, of course, being 12 Byzantine Emperors.
Okay, then. if you say so.
Another thing I've noticed is that there's a direct correlation between how lame a podcast is and how much they try to sell merchandise.
Really?
I mean, I listened to some bad podcasts, and they all had a cafe press, and some of them that aren't in this contest, the worse they were, the more they plugged their cafe press, and the more they talked about how much stuff they got for sale, and the more they asked for donations, the more they tried to make money.
Oh, maybe there's some people out there who just want to do this podcasting thing to make money and don't actually care about podcasting.
Well, go to the bookstore and look at all the books on podcasting. A lot of them are basically how to monetize your podcasting, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I think it's all happened mostly because that stupid MTV guy kept, marketing the idea of quit your day job, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, we're going to help people quit their day jobs and they can podcast for a living. And a lot of people sort of have this dream of not having to do the job they hate and just being able to talk into a microphone and internet all day. And that's a dream many people have. I lived that dream and it sucked. So I don't know what you want so badly.
Yeah. I've also noticed that a lot of lame podcasts, it's not that they have bad websites, it's that they don't have websites at all. They're just a feed in iTunes, and I can find neither hide nor hair of them anywhere else on the internet. The feeds often go down. Sometimes the feed is just straight up broken and sends me gibberish instead of MP3s.
Yeah. A lot of
One
podcasts
site,
have the same names as other podcasts.
Oh,
make it even
God.
harder.
Yeah, there's one that actually is already gone as far as I can tell that was submitted for an award.
Wow.
Well, one of our awards.
Yeah, it was submitted to this contest.
Now, before we go any further with this, however, I would like to point out a few things. That one, this is all in good fun if you can't tell. If your podcast is mentioned here, you saw a bunch of hits, and you came and listened to this, don't feel bad. One, we hope that at least some of what we say is constructive criticism. Two, we're not saying you were the worst podcast. We're saying you were the worst podcast that our listeners told us about.
That's what we're saying, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But also, it comes down to you're doing a podcast. Anyone who is doing something like this, anyone who decides that they're going to take their valuable free time and make free content for the internet and just give it away, whether you're going to make music or a webcomic or a blog or a podcast or anything, and you're doing this on your own for nothing in return, you're already better than everyone in the world who doesn't do anything like that.
Yeah, pretty much. Even the worst podcaster in the world, the guy who just makes a podcast that sounds like this. Hi. I like anime. Yeah, that guy is still better. Maybe not as a person, but as a constructive creator of content is still better than the guy who sits at home doing nothing but playing World of Warcraft.
Especially because lately on the internet, as time has gone on, there's been a lot of this culture of entitlement where there was the era when MP3s, you could just get anything you wanted on the internet, download it automatically. And then the RIA started suing people. And a lot of younger tech guys always like to say, yeah, information wants to be free. Free society. Everyone will just do stuff because they want to. And it's going to be great. And you won't have to pay for music or anything. And unless those people are also willing to either help create, facilitate the creation of, or in some way support that free content, they're basically just shit talkers.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a good thing enough people are not shit talkers that we actually do have lots of free music and free podcasts and free everything.
Yes. So one last time, and I can't stress this enough, even if we give you the award of the worst podcast from our listeners, you're better than most of our listeners who submitted you because most of them don't do anything like this.
Yep. Also, if you hear your podcast mentioned, we would hope that you would try to improve your podcast and... because you actually probably do have a bad podcast. We're not going to lie too much here.
Of course, I guess, be full disclosure here, I hate 90% of everything.
Yeah.
And that includes podcasting. So I'll point out that some of the podcasts that were submitted are above average. They're well above average.
For podcasts, at least.
Yeah, that's what I'm about to say. In terms of podcasting, they're so above average and bordering on the upper 10% of podcasts that is amazing. But in my eyes, I still don't like them at all.
All right.
So without further ado.
All right, now we're not going to go over every single podcast that was submitted by someone. We're just going to go over the finalists. So these are the worst of the worst.
Or the most interesting to talk about. Because remember, I did offer bonus points if your podcast was bad but had a lot of listeners.
Yep. Okay, so Here is the least worst of the finalists.
Well, in order of what percentage of the podcast Scott was able to listen to before he turned it off in disgust.
That is correct. I listened to 2 episodes of each of these podcasts, and I wrote down how long the episode was and how long I listened to it for before I just turned it off. Now, I didn't actually calculate the percentages, so I'm just going to, estimate here. But we're going to go by how much of the podcast I listened to. So we're going to start off with this podcast called Mechhead. I listened to episodes 11 and 32.
I listened to the most recent episode and some random one near the beginning.
Yep. And I listened to 100% of this podcast, mostly because episode 11 was 7 minutes long, and episode 32 was 4 minutes long. I listened to the whole thing without killing myself. Now, Mechhead is a podcast about Battletech. This guy basically reviews mechs in the game of Battletech.
Now, I'd like to read the actual submission from John C., he's the one who submitted this podcast to us.
All right.
I have this locked down lead pipe lock for the worst of all time.
Sorry, you didn't win.
No, in fact, you sent us probably the best podcast we heard.
Still bad. This is a bad podcast, but better than the rest of the finalists we're about to go
All right,
through.
he says, it has some of the worst sound quality of all time. I beg to differ. It is pretty bad. It's not that bad, though.
It's okay audio quality compared to some of the other ones. My number one problem is a problem a lot of podcasts had, where the music was a lot louder than the talking.
Well, he goes on to say the guy has no idea what dynamic range means to someone trying to listen to a show. 1 minute loud, 1 minute super soft. I like how super soft was in all caps.
It did not have noise, though. There wasn't a lot of annoying sounds. I mean, a couple of times there was some breathing noise that was annoying, but other than that, I mean, it wasn't like where I was going to kill myself.
Yep, the podcast is so bad mostly because it doesn't have a terrible theme to make it wretched. He basically just seems to think that it's really boring and poorly produced.
It is boring and poorly produced. He had poor transitions. Like, he would just be talking about one thing, and then without transitioning at all, would be talking about something else. Like, he would say what his show is going to be about. It was like, yeah, today I'm going to talk about Animal Crossing. Not Animal Crossing. That's a different podcast. Like, today I'm going to talk about the Timberwolf mech. The Timberwolf mech is a blah-de-blah-de-blah, and it's like, whoa, you just jumped right into it there. You kind of lose him. And he does that in every episode. He didn't change that.
Yep, now I will point out that to someone who doesn't know anything about Battletech or any of that, this podcast is useless, and I can see why you would hate it.
This podcast doesn't teach you anything about Battletech. He assumes you pretty much know all there is to know about the game of Battletech, and if you don't know anything, you're just going to be completely lost and say, what the fuck?
Yep, now, the guy who sent the email in also says that he found out that supposedly this guy has never played more than 2 rounds worth of a Battletech game.
I listened to what he was saying, and I've played quite a few BattleTech games in my day. And it doesn't matter how much this guy has actually played the game. He does have an understanding of the rules and has definitely read the books. And what he's saying isn't really useful to a BattleTech player. Like, even if you're a BattleTech player, there's no reason to listen to this show. But this guy does know what he's talking about enough.
Yeah, when he talked about the mechs, all the things he said were dead on. So, because this is definitely the best of the podcast we got, I have some actual constructive criticism here. All this guy needs to do to have a good podcast is, 1, get a better logo. He has probably the worst logo in the history of podcasts.
Oh, that's bad, because in one of the episodes, I think I heard him talking about how he's going to have a cool new logo soon.
Oh, well, all right.
But I think that's the one he's referring to.
Really?
I'm not sure, but maybe.
It looks like someone just kind of poorly drew the word mechhead on a piece of paper and scanned it in off center.
Yep.
But 2, all he needs to do is come up with some transitions, some good dynamic content, and he reviews mechs, which is okay. You can have a podcast about that. Got to go into more depth. He pretty much just describes the mech and what it's good at. He doesn't offer much insight. Well, I know the guy knows enough about the game where he probably could offer a lot of insight, and I think he just needs to tap that.
I think basically the world needs a podcast about BattleTech. There is no question. And all this guy has to do to have a good podcast about BattleTech, and maybe to become the premier BattleTech podcast, is, all right, your show is 7 minutes long about a game that is incredibly strategically deep. Good job, guy.
Yeah, I could probably talk for an entire week's worth of Geeknights on the various strategies using that.
All right, we're doing a BattleTech episode. I'm adding it to the list here.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to.
Yep. But you just have to say something about the BattleTech game that is actually useful, interesting, or entertaining. And there are a lot of things to say. I could think of them right now. You just have to say them. Imagine if someone is a BattleTech player. They play BattleTech every week. What do they want to know? What do they want to learn? And say those things, and you'll have a good show.
All right, but anyway, we shouldn't dwell on this because we don't want to turn it into the review of one podcast.
No, we don't.
We're going to breeze through some of the rest of these because this is the top of the tree. This is the apex of the pyramid. This is as good as it gets.
Well, I think the next one would be the Nintendo podcast, a.k.a. the Liftcast.
Now,
I listened to episodes 30 and 23.
I'm not sure what I listened to because it was hard to tell if the Nintendo podcast and the Liftcast are the same or not, or just
Yes, I'm
what
not
the deal
sure.
is.
I'm not sure. But episode 23, I listened to 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Oh, no, wait. Okay, maybe I got this wrong. It looks like it was 2 hours and 45 minutes long, and I listened to 5 minutes and 17 seconds.
Oh.
And the other one was an hour and 16 minutes long, and I lasted 7 minutes and 25 seconds.
Well, Jay Wallace submitted this one, and he wrote up a freaking essay on exactly why this podcast is bad. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's very long, but it's very to the point and very harsh. He talks about how the microphone etiquette is bad, and the sound quality is bad, and the guy says, okay, and smacks his lips all the time. He goes on to say how he emailed the dude and pointed out some of the problems he had with the audio quality in iTunes, and the guy responded saying that he got new equipment, and apparently the podcast didn't sound any better afterward.
Yeah, this guy has the same problem of music too loud, talking too quiet. Yeah, there was a lot of pausing and hiccups and stuttering. He had bad pronunciation. He said melee instead of melee. Which
Granted, when I was a little kid and I played that Robin Hood game for the NES, I said the word melee because I'd never heard anyone say the word. I'd only ever seen it in books.
Yeah, there was actually another podcast that made the same mistake I'm going to mention later. But yeah, at least this guy recognized that his music was too loud and his voice was too quiet. He actually said so much in episode 23. Also, he seemed reasonably intelligent. It's just he didn't say the reasonably intelligent things that it sounded like he knew. All he did was say in a monotone completely boring and useless information. It was like a bad high school teacher.
Yep.
Talking about Nintendo.
All he really would need to do is have a writer or plan ahead a little bit and have some, I don't know, again, dynamic content. Say something interesting.
I mean, he actually got some people onto the show as co-hosts with Skype, and those people didn't really talk so much, and he would ask them stuff, and they would answer most of the time with just 2 words, 2-word answers or 3-word answers.
Yes, and there would be pauses. You know, we here at Geeknights have something I like to call the Rim and Scott Sound Smarter filter, which does a great many things to our audio. One of the things it does is it dynamically reduces silence. So if we pause for a second, between bits, it gets rid of that. And this guy, it's like he runs the opposite filter.
Yeah, there was a whole lot of pausing, a whole lot of dead air going on. I don't know what he was doing.
I get the impression that pretty much every podcast from this point on in our show doesn't edit at all. I think they literally just record, upload.
That is not good.
Yes, it's one thing if you're doing a live show, actually live, where people listen on Skype or TalkShoe or whatever, and it's live, then you upload it and you do that. But if you're not doing that to be live, there's no reason to limit yourself to all the problems that are inherent in doing live audio.
Yeah, it's why? It's if you're not doing a live concert or a live radio show, you have the luxury of being able to edit it before you give it out to the world. Why would you deny yourself a luxury? That's like going to a store and they say free ice cream and you say no thank you. What the hell? The only other thing I got to say about this guy is that he started actually discussing. I actually listened to one of the shows long enough for him to discuss a topic. And he was talking about why someone asked him in an email. I can't believe someone emailed him why people were all excited about, new Pokemon games, but they weren't excited about Smash Brothers Brawl, which is kind of a weird question. But he started to answer it, and his answer just made no sense. There was no logic to his answer at all. I don't know what he was trying to say, but it was either wrong or pointless or meaningless.
Yeah, honestly, if I weren't tired, I would have pulled up that audio and played it just so you could hear it. But I got enough audio clips to deal with here.
Yeah, so should we move to the next show?
I think so, because pretty much from this point on, we're going down into the depth.
All right. The next podcast up for bashing is Anime Pulse.
Hi, I'm Ichigo.
I'm Bato.
Charlie.
Dude, okay, I warned you. I warned you. I swear to God, I warned you.
No, no. Ah!
Yeah. Come on,
No,
Max.
ah!
Max, help me out here.
You're gonna get Phalon's calendar wet. Ah!
It's gonna be good.
Charlie.
No. No. No.
Okay, fine. So this is the Anime Pulse podcast, and we are here bringing you the love.
Do I need to step it up a notch or something like that?
Bam.
I still got plenty of water.
What? You said you were gonna kick it up a notch.
I hate that guy.
Charlie.
The story revolves around a young girl named Ku.
Cool.
Ku.
Okay.
Ku Shiratori.
This was submitted to us by Gabe, and I'm not going to read his whole paragraph. It's not very long. He says that the show has a lot of potential, basically, and that they could live up to, I guess, all the accolades he's heard about them, except for the fact that, quote, they deliberately talk over each other during their segments. It pisses me off to no end. Between that and their propensity to eat directly into the microphone, I want to rip my hair out and shove down their bleeding maws.
All right, well, let's talk about, Anime Pulse. Let's see. I listened to episodes 73 and 69.
I'd heard of Anime Pulse, but I didn't really know who did it, and I'd never actually heard it until it was submitted to our contest.
Yep. Episode 69 was about 90 minutes long. I listened to about 10 minutes and 36 seconds. And episode 73 was a little over an hour, and I was able to listen for 7 minutes before I couldn't listen anymore.
Now, this is where it gets interesting, because Anime Pulse's audio quality, technically, is far superior to many of these other podcasts.
Yeah, it was actually pretty good. They still had the problem of music is a lot louder than talking, and, you know, some of the volumes would be kind of uneven. One guy louder than another guy.
Well, part of that
a
is...
guy moving farther away and closer to the microphone.
It's obvious that they have one omnidirectional mic in the room, and they all just kind of talk at it, and they make a lot of noise in the background. Constantly, people are poking at things and popping at things and eating, and I hear stuff going on and things bumping into other things. But other than that, the audio quality is better than most podcasts out there. However, despite that and their relatively high production values, it's obvious that they don't edit at all. Or if they do, they leave a lot in that they shouldn't leave in. A lot of pausing, ums and ahs, and just the podcast trails off constantly. And the worst thing is, one of the guys in the background, it's like he constantly just yells random things.
Yes, there's a guy, I don't know who it is, but...
Chocolate!
Yeah, it's like... They just yell out random words. Yeah,
Like,
chicken.
It's just not funny at all. It's just annoying.
This podcast in general, it felt to me like they had a lot of intentionally planned out jokes beforehand, or a lot of, like, they just had impulsive jokes. You know, like they thought they were being spontaneous, like, haha, spontaneous funny thing that just came to mind, but none of it was funny. It was just incredibly annoying. These are the kind of guys, it was obviously apparent after listening to this shows for a few minutes. You know when you go to an anime convention, and you stand in line, and a guy comes up to you, and he just starts talking at you, and this is not a guy you want to talk to. He's an annoying guy. He's saying things you don't care about. He's telling you about his hentai collection or whatever, and you just want him to go away. This podcast, Anime Pulse, is made by those kind of guys. It's just three of those guys talking to each other.
Now, aside from that, it takes them forever to get to what they actually talk about. And to not go into a lot of detail, whenever they get finally on topic, they actually do what their show's about, and they review anime.
I never got to that point, so tell me.
I forced myself to listen to a whole episode, and then half of another episode.
Whoa!
And then I went to a third episode and skipped to the review part.
Whoa.
They review shallow anime, and they review it in a shallow manner. So not only do they watch shows that are the equivalent of Kagehime, they're just garbage anime. There's shows that we watched the first episode of, and they're not even worth talking about on the show. They're just garbage.
Well, I mean, are they reviewing them in the Dave and Joel style of, wow, this sucked?
No, they're reviewing them in the, I really like this anime. And
Whoa!
And they rate it on this scale. They rate every anime, and I haven't figured out the scale, but I've heard such ratings as Burn It, Crackers, and, like, Super Crackers.
So I guess Crackers is good and Burn It is bad?
Something like that. And the anime they review is just abhorrent and terrible, and they don't provide any insight. Like, the reviews could be okay if you took a bad show and reviewed it fully. like Anime World Order does, it'd be good. But they review it in such a shallow manner that I would learn more by reading the freaking Wikipedia about that show.
What kind? What do they just say? What happened in the show? Like, this show is about blah. This is what happened.
Yeah,
The main themes of the show are this. The main genres are that.
And they kind of trail off a lot, and they focus on fan service bits, and it's just it's bad.
So those are the people who like fan service.
They
now?
like the kind of shows that we make fun of as being stupid.
Ah, so they're the reason anime sucks in the U.S. 'cause they're buying all this shit. Now I know who to beat up at the next convention.
They also really seem pro bootleg, and there's a whole bit in one of the recent episodes where they were talking about fan subgroups, and they seem to get mad if a show gets licensed and the fan subbers stop fan subbing.
What?
Like, they got mad at some fan subbing group for dropping their fan subs of, I think it was Death Note, after it got licensed.
'Cause it was licensed, fools.
They also spend a lot of time, they watch One Piece, Naruto, and Bleach, and they review the most recent episode, which basically comes down to, so-and-so fought so-and-so, and it was awesome. And then
Listen,
so-and-so
I
fought so-and-so,
don't-
and it was awesome.
All right, listen. If you're someone who likes those shows, you're gonna watch them, and if you watch them, I mean, they could be just summed up in like a few sentences, like so-and-so fought so-and-so. So I guess if you like those shows, you don't want to spend the time to watch them, that's a decent service because now you don't have to watch 30 minutes. You can get the whole thing in 2 minutes from these guys. However, if you don't like those shows, you really don't want someone describing them to you.
Yes.
And if you do watch the shows, you don't need someone describing them to you. So who is that for, really? It's for people who like it but don't want to watch it, which is so few people.
Now, again, it would be okay if they at least provided some insight. Or, I mean, I could see where if you watched a show and you talked about it every week, you could provide a lot of running commentary or insight, or point out, like, notice how this character's fighting with this character, but yet he says this line. Well, if you go back to episode 23, remember that dream sequence? Yeah, that's where they're going with this. Metaphor, or things like that. Or the music in this episode was actually done by so-and-so as a favor and blah, blah, blah. But
Well, I think the problem is that these shows are so shallow that those things just don't exist to be talked about.
they could do more. I stand by the statement that they review shallow anime in a shallow manner.
Yeah.
Beyond all that, the best part, Clarissa from Anime World Order went nuts about complaining that Scott was supposedly sexist because he asked if why some manga that was in a shonen magazine was published in Shoujo magazine. None of that matters. We talked about it yesterday. But if she wants to get mad about sexist anime podcasters, I submit the following from Anime fucking Pulse.
We like CP.
We like CPM. John's a good guy.
Damn good guy.
His wife runs a yaoi label called Be Beautiful.
I'm not too thrilled with that.
Well, you know, you gotta let the women have their side projects.
Oh yeah, this is purely a guy's thing. But then they'll turn around and you're like, wait a minute, no, this is something for the girls.
Something for the ladies.
But, you know, it's out of a shonen magazine. And I really have a hard time seeing this being in a shonen magazine, honestly.
Crab chips.
And one of the things that makes me really think that this is more of a girls' anime or girls' story is because it revolves around her life and the way she sees things. And one of the things that helped me think that this was more a series for girls was like the animation styling. The girls were drawn very beautifully, but so were the guys.
Like,
the guys are
style?
very, very bishonen. You know, they use a lot of pastel colors.
Mm-hmm.
But then you get these moments of purely guy thing where, like, you got the one girl helping another girl have a bath. You know, scrubbing her back for, woo! I couldn't figure out who this was written for. Because there's a lot of action in it, but at the same time, they're sitting there and they're discussing the feelings of something or
you know,
how these relate to each other. It's like, this isn't what goes on in an action. So, there is action in it, yes. But there's a lot of dialogue that has nothing to do with the shonen.
So, I expect a tirade next week.
Yes. The only other things I could say about Anime Pulse, just to seal it up, is that they read every single email regardless of whether it's useful or not, which is annoying as hell. And it seems like only one guy on the show has command, and the other people are just the interrupting guys. And those interrupting guys have to go. If this one guy just did the show on his own, it would probably double the quality. Still,
Yes.
I wouldn't listen to it. I wouldn't listen to it still, because it still wouldn't be good. But maybe if he got another co-host that was intelligent, then he could have a show might be worth listening
That's
to.
all he needs to do. Get rid of all those other people, maybe get one or two other new people who are good, or just do the show himself, and do a little bit of research and have any more insight than he currently has.
Yeah.
Because even if he doesn't go to the depth that like Anime World Order does, or the hilarity that Dave and Joel do, in the very least, he's reviewing stuff that most people wouldn't review. There aren't many podcasts about that kind of anime. And while I don't like that kind of anime, if you reviewed that kind of anime well and had some insight, it'd probably be okay and you'd have a market.
All right.
All right.
Now,
Further into the rabbit hole.
we're gonna talk about a podcast now that was the first one I listened to of all the bunch. And as soon as I listened to it, I said, this is the winner. This is the worst podcast that anyone submitted. But I was wrong.
Now-
there are worse podcasts that were submitted.
We don't have to say a lot about it. I'm just going to play an opening bit from it here. And I think you will gather everything we will have to say.
Talk Shoe. Recorded live.
Here we go.
Welcome to this episode of Animal Crossing and Other Games. Hello everybody, this is episode 25, titled Pogo Island DS, which is the game I'm going to talk about. Now Pogo is a gaming community website in which you play games. Most of them give you tokens that you can exchange for tickets and drawings for prizes. There are 3 types of prizes for the free accounts, which is the $50 daily, the $250 weekly, and the $1,000 monthly. Now for the Club Pogo members, which are the paid accounts, you have those 3 drawings, and then you have this miscellaneous drawing, which will have something random, and usually of around a $500 value. And the current one is a scrapbooking.
The podcast is called Animal Crossing and Other Games. I listened to episode 3, which is about Halo 2, and episode 25 about Pogo Island DS. I listened to, let's see, the episode 3 was 10 minutes long. I turned it off after 4 minutes. And episode 25 was 16 minutes long, and I also turned it off after 4 minutes.
Now, I give this kid props for trying, and I don't know what else I can say. Really, if his audio quality were better, that'd be a big step, because you can't really even understand what he's saying.
No, this guy is doing his podcast with TalkShoe, which is that thing that lets you have listener participation and such. But he's not using it well, because I've heard, Twit uses TalkShoe now to do stuff, and their audio quality is still awesome. So this guy is doing something. He's basically not caring about audio quality. There's constant hissing and static. Episode 25 had worse audio quality than episode 3. He blows into the mic. It's just, God, the audio quality here is the worst audio quality.
Now, here's another interesting point. Anime Pulse has good production quality, yet the content was, in our opinion, in a word, garbage. By the same token, this kid has probably the worst audio quality in podcasting. And yet, And yet, his show is relatively coherent and together, and he's obviously trying to keep it in a single thread. He's got his little topics and segues. He's got his act together better than the audio quality would lead you to believe.
Yes. The thing is, his voice is really nerdy. He says a lot. And, I mean, he talks about Halo 2 for 10 minutes. I mean, what are you going to say in 10 minutes? That's not very, he doesn't say anything meaningful, but he's obviously trying really hard. He obviously cares. He's obviously putting in the effort. It's just, I think I don't know if he has more potential than that. I mean, he might have just that's the best he can do. It could be that, because he doesn't sound like he's a kid that can do much more than that. He also sounds like a really young kid. Like, he must be in elementary or middle school, probably. So maybe this is the best a middle school podcast can be. But a middle school podcast is still not as good as a better podcast.
Now, this was submitted by Water is Poison, and quote, I present to you the Animal Crossing and Other Games podcast. I'm not exactly sure what it is about, because it's too hard to listen to. He goes on a bit. The episodes range from 1 minute long to an hour and a half.
Really? I didn't see any of those hour-and-a-half ones.
I didn't try.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Now, you might think, well, isn't that the bottom?
Well, no, it is not the bottom. Now, we got 2 left here I want to talk about, but one of them might be ineligible. You want to talk about the ineligible one first?
Yeah, we'll do that one first, because if this podcast had met the rules of submission, and the person who submitted it even stated straight up that it does not meet the rules of submission, but it was so bad that there was no way it couldn't be brought up, and good fucking God.
Yeah, so the podcast that was, if this was eligible to win the contest according to the rules we mentioned at the beginning when we announced the contest originally, this would be the winner. This would be the worst podcast I've ever heard.
Also, it was submitted by the one, the only Jeff Tatarek.
Whoa, Jeff Tatarek.
And, quote, I'll read his whole email. I nominate the iGame podcast. It hasn't been updated since August 2006, so it's automatically ineligible, but I don't care. Why is it bad? It's little more than some kids talking shit over their cell phones, acting cooler than they could possibly be. Not only that, but they just talk all over each other. It's painful.
Basically, I listened to episode 21, and I listened to another episode which didn't have a number, but was called Our Debate. The Our Debate episode was 4 minutes. I didn't last 2. The episode 21 was 13 minutes. I lasted less than 2. The audio quality might be actually worse than the Animal Crossing guy. It's all scratchy, and it just couldn't be worse. It really does sound like kids talking over their cell phones, like Jeff says.
There isn't actually a show. It's just nothing. I listened to one episode.
It sounds like elementary school kids yelling at each other about nothing. It's like if you had a conference call with some 5th graders and they were talking about who was smarter. And they're like, oh, brainy poo, stupidity doo-doo head.
Now, the worst thing about this is that I couldn't find the podcast at first. I had some trouble because there are a bunch of other podcasts also called iGame.
And there are a bunch of other things called iGame that aren't podcasts.
And when I went to download it so I could grab some clips, the link was broken and it was gone. Luckily, it's still on my iPod.
Yeah, I only got...
The builder refused. I am the visual, the inspiration that made ladies sing the blues. I'm the spark that makes your idea bright. The same spark that lights the dark so that you can know your left from your right.
Again, the unlicensed music.
The unrelevant music. What does this have to do with games?
The story that just begun, the promise of what's to come, and I'ma remain a soldier till the war is won.
1 degrees. Yeah, but Las Vegas was 129.
But there's no humidity there. But still, it's hot.
Let's skip a bit. Maybe it gets better.
Yeah, but I saw the Constitution, the exit. Smithsonian Institute of Space and Science, or whatever. That's really cool.
Our listeners can't pronounce that. Our listeners are probably like, except Ninja Consultant, who is reviewing us, please.
All right, I can't. I had to turn that off.
It's just kids yapping at each other. There's nothing that human beings want to listen to less than kids yapping at each other. I mean, even Bill Cosby said it best when he said parents don't want justice, they just want quiet. We don't want to listen to kids talking. Shut up, kids. Shut up now.
Now, it's hard to describe how painful it was to try to listen to this. And I resolved that I was going to listen to all of at least one episode of everything that anyone submitted.
Wow, you're a braver soul than I.
I made it 45 seconds on this, and the
Whoa,
only reason...
I lasted a few minutes.
The
I
only
can't believe
reason,
I beat you on one
the
of them.
only reason I made it 45 seconds was that I was going down the Taconic at about 90 miles an hour, and there was some traffic ahead.
And you couldn't reach it to turn it off?
I could not take my hand off the wheel to stop it. I couldn't make it stop. So, Jeff Tatarek, even though you cannot win the contest, you're going to be getting a prize anyway, because I'm not sure how you found it. I knew what it was, and I had trouble finding it. You gave me a link, and I had trouble finding it. This is probably the worst audio on the internet.
It just... if it's not, I'd like to see what is, because goddamn. Anything worse than this starts to crosses the line where, it's like, how some things are so bad they're good, right?
Yeah, like if you watch an old robot show, most people don't pretend they're good. Even people who love robot shows won't say with a straight face that this is some deep, meaningful show.
Some of them are, but not many.
Yeah, but many of them aren't. And
Most
you
of
know
them
which
aren't.
ones are which.
Yes. But yeah, this is basically, you're about to cross the line where it's so bad it's good, but they didn't cross the line. It's just so bad. It's the worst there is.
And the reason Animal Crossing and other games is better than this is because at least that was a show. Regardless of the problems the kid's having doing his show, it was a show. There is a concept. The kid is following through with the concept. He has a format. He talks in an order that somewhat makes sense.
Yeah.
This is just nothing.
This is just kids talking to each other. All right. Now, the worst podcast that was submitted to us.
What's the deal with these bad podcasts?
That is eligible for the contest according to our rules is called Power Up.
Now, I'm just going to play a clip, and I think I don't know what else we'll need to say.
All views expressed in this podcast are not a video game buddy and belong to the participants of Power Up.
Why do I feel like I'm the fattest person alive?
My nose is stuffy. So like
Yeah. Ooh, it's good computer, $299.99.
So like
You told Mikey that I went in the garbage can and pick up the garbage can.
So like
They're pumping money into these businesses like it's going out of style, making the rich richer, making themselves poorer, stupider, and fatter. And God bless America.
So like
Who the fuck's Gay James again? And what's up, everybody? It's Mike Wackasm. Today, for all you people that listen to us on a weekly basis, you have to be terrorists today.
You broke up real badly.
I broke up real bad.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't hear it. I heard music the whole time.
Yeah, like you heard nothing. You went. That's the way it sounded.
Well, maybe that was the sound effect I was going for, right?
Hey, who's that guy?
We already completed another episode of Power Up because I wasn't paying attention to the sounds.
Just like last week.
Yeah, it's hard. I'm getting fucking IM'd again by Ahmed Abdul-Salam and...
It's basically, as far as I can tell, imagine if you gave a bunch of 14-year-olds phones.
Yep.
And then you set up some sort of Big Brother spy thing where whenever they had a conference call with each other, you just recorded it.
And they're all friends, so they have stuff to talk about with each other. That's Power Up.
That's it.
Now, what's good about Power Up? There is one thing that's good. Their opening music was actually relevant. It was an OC remix of some sort, but they played the same one for every episode. I thought they were going to mix it up, but they didn't.
Nah.
Let's see. Why was this podcast so bad? Let's see. Everyone has an annoying voice. The audio quality is terrible. They even said that they don't care about audio quality. They don't edit, and they're proud of it. They have the same... I don't know if it's the same guy, but it might as well be the same interrupting guy from Anime Pulse. They spent, like, a lot of time just making fun of each other, as people would if they knew each other. And why do I want to listen to other people make fun of each other? I don't know how they have a girl on this show, but they treat the girl like shit, and the girl just talks to them like, blah, blah, blah. You guys are all just pissed because I'm not with you. And she doesn't say anything interesting. None of them say anything interesting.
It's like being in a room with a bunch of 14-year-olds who are 2 feet shorter than you and think they're tougher than you.
and they're all talking shit to each other. They all have different volume levels. They all have annoying voices. They spend the entire as much of the podcast as I listen to, they pretty much just bickered the entire time.
Isn't this the one that has really freaking long episodes, too?
Yes. Episode 25 was 2.5 hours long. I lasted less than 4 minutes. Episode 60 was 2 hours and 49 minutes long. I lasted 5 minutes. The worst part of this podcast is actually something very specific. In episode 60, some guy was making horrible mouth noises into the microphone, like...
Actually, that happens a lot in Anime Pulse, but not nearly as badly.
Now, did you just listen to me making those mouth noises right now? Wasn't that incredibly painful? Oh, stop doing that. Okay. Yeah.
And keep in mind, that's with a downward expander getting rid of much of that.
Yeah, I just made that. That is the worst noise, one of the worst noises you can possibly make. I mean, they might as well have made a podcast of chalkboard nails on a chalkboard, and it would have been just as bad. Just the noise that is coming out of the headphones listening to Power Up makes me want to put a knife in my ear. And I almost would have put a knife in my ear if it weren't for the ability to turn it off, which I did.
Now, of course, we just did a show here on Worst Podcast Ever, and Power Up wins the contest. However, because I'm totally unprofessional now in a stroke of irony, I actually don't have the email with the submission in front of me, so I don't know who submitted it.
Really?
However, I can look that up handily.
Okay, I found it. The winner is DJ Janai.
DJ Janai, who we're hoping to meet someday at a con, because he's pretty cool.
Yep. Let's see. I'm going to read his email because it's short.
All right.
To Geeknights. It would have to be Power Up. Site, feed, links, whatever.
Oh, here it is. Wow, he has nice bullet points. Yeah.
They have more than 10 minutes just to take care of technical difficulties, and they don't edit it out.
Now, compare that to Dave and Joel, where they often would record themselves having audio difficulties, but yet it was still funny.
Yep, or they'd use that as the stinger at the end of the show.
The stinger.
Poor organization. Too much steering away from the game topics. One of the guys shouldn't be on radio at all. More of an interference than useful.
Kind of like Chocolate Charlie!
Sort of like interrupting guy, yeah. Glitches galore, lots of audio dropouts. Crap audio levels, random laptop beeping from overheating. Sometimes they throw racial jokes, slurs, handicap jokes, etc. A segment where
I believe, Scott, you mean etc.
Etc.
The only reason I bring that up because I was going to rag on 2 of these podcasts for saying etc. wrong, and then I forgot to. So I had to at least rag on you for that.
Yeah. And a segment where they mention games coming soon. The girl talks like it's softcore phone sex and she's underage.
Outstanding.
Yeah. It's basically a bunch of trashy teens talking to each other, occasionally about video games, and it is the worst podcast eligible for our contest. And DJ Janai, you have won, and we will send you a prize.
Yes. However, we will be contacting all of our finalists and probably sending all of you some form of prize because every one of you did your part and provided us with a lot of pain, a lot of agony, but also a lot of entertainment.
Yes, do not be surprised if your contest prizes are actually revenge in an envelope.
Now also, again, like I said at the beginning, 1, this was all in good fun, and 2, this is our 289th episode, give or take.
Good God.
And we've come a long way. I mean, Geeknights used to sound like this. All right, blah, 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 testing.
It works. It still goes way off the edge.
Yeah, because you sit far away and I sit kind of close. Maybe if I point it that way.
Then if I talk and it bounces off the wall, not so bad.
This works.
Whatever.
So. So we're kind of shot today because all we really want to talk about is Jack Thompson. Jack Thompson. So I don't blame any podcast ever for having trouble getting started, and I wish the best of luck to all of our finalists and our finalist submissions. However,
if you're on episode a lot and you haven't improved, or in fact you have not improved and gone downhill from your earlier episodes, just stop. I mean, it's one thing for people to complain about pod fading, but in some cases, pod fading is the way to go. Sort of like sometimes you just got to put the pet to sleep. It's too sick. It's better to let it die than to keep it alive.
Now, our listeners had better be warned because if anyone ever crosses our ire, we'll probably just replace our random episodes in our feed with iGame. Because luckily, even though it seems to have disappeared, maybe it'll come back, I've got several hours of it on my iPod and in iTunes. And I'm going to keep that around because that's a powerful weapon.
That is. You could just, if people are being annoying.
In fact, the next time the Visigoths are at our house and I need the dishes to be done, iGame's going on and not coming off till someone starts doing dishes.
I gotta order that amp and those speakers then so we can crank it up real loud.
Yes, especially if we put a lockbox over the power so they can't unplug it.
Ooh.
I'm all about this.
Yeah.
All right. Stay tuned next week when, well, I'm not going to tell you what we're doing next week, but...
I am going to tell you a secret, though. We've managed to plan out episodes weeks in advance.
Yes, in fact, in certain days, Wednesdays, anime days, we've got pretty much the next several months easily available to us.
Yeah, I mean, we used to come home every day from work and say, what do we do the show on tonight? I don't know. What should we do the show on? So, in a secret Google Calendar, not accessible to the rest of you fools, we have written down what shows we're doing on what days, and we planned out topics for weeks to come. But we still need Thursdays, because you only got like 2 or 3 Thursdays planned, so send us Thursday ideas.
Yes, now, of course, for those of you who don't listen to Thursday, remember that Thursday is
for
the
those who
catch-all.
don't listen to Thursday, yeah, in a Thursday podcast. Real smart.
All right, yeah, it is Thursday, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, well. This has been Geeknights with Rim and Scott. Special thanks to DJ Pretzel for the opening music.
Be sure to visit our website at www.frontrowcrew.com, where you'll find show notes, links, our awesome forum, a link to our Frapper map, and links to all the RSS feeds.
We say feeds plural because Geeknights airs 4 nights a week, covering 4 different brands of geekery. Mondays are science and technology. Tuesdays, we have video games, board games, and RPGs. Wednesdays are anime, manga, comic nights. And Thursdays are the catch-alls for various rants and tomfoolery.
You can send us feedback by email to geeknights@frontrowcrew.com. Or you can send audio feedback via Odeo. Just click the link that says Send Me an Audio on the right side of our website.
If you like what you hear, you can catch the last 100 episodes in iTunes or in your favorite podcatcher. For the complete archives, visit the website, which has everything.
Geeknights is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 2.5 license. This means you can do whatever you want with it as long as you give us credit, don't make money, and share it in kind. Geeknights is recorded live with no studio and no audience. But unlike those other late shows, it's actually recorded at night.